welcome to the Healing for the Heart podcast. It's really good to have you back with us, and we're on the third of 3 podcasts that we are chatting with the folks who do our community development work across the city. And they are joining me today, and we're going to talk about some training that we have been doing recently. It's not just the community development folks that have been doing the training. We've done it with a number of people in the staff. So we've been partnering with an organisation called the Trauma Resource Institute. They're an organisation that are based in the States, and they work all across the world, particularly in situations where there's been some huge traumatic event has happened, often where there are earthquakes or floods. They're working in Ukraine at the moment, supporting teachers and young people in schools in Ukraine at the moment to try and help to mitigate against some of the impact of the war that's going on there. And so they work with a particularly cutting edge neuroscience tools that help folks to start to regulate their responses to trauma. And that can be responses to trauma in the now, or it can be triggered responses to trauma from events in the past. So that's kind of the background to it. We think that the model is fabulous in terms of being able to help folks just in local communities to be able to manage some of their triggers. And I suppose it's kind of come about for us because as we've worked with folks in communities, as we work with folks in clinical sessions, we don't want folks to have meltdowns all the time. We don't want folks to be so triggered that they're not actually be able to function. And in some spaces, that's what we see sometimes, and that's what people tell us. So we want to be able to empower people to have the tools at their disposal to learn the skills so that they're able to manage their own triggers, and they're not, they don't find themselves in a situation where they can't cope effectively. So we did this training, we'd organised it for January, and it was heavy training because it was 5 days in a row, wasn't it? So it was 3, and then we had a break for the weekend in 2, or it was 2 and then a break for the weekend in 3. It's all kind of a blur now. Why don't you tell us a wee bit about the training and how you found the training?
Found it, I personally found it really, really fascinating. Just very mind-opening for me.
Lots of things that you learned.
So much. So the first thing for me was seeing the ACEs, the way the ACEs were scored.
So that's adverse childhood experiences.
Yep. And not realising how high I personally scored on it, and then understanding a lot of the people that I work with scored highly on there. And then moving into understanding that we don't diminish the importance of trauma. Trauma affects people, it affects the way they react to things, it affects behaviours and stuff. But that whole flavour of how do we move on? How do we become resiliency focused rather than trauma focused? Yep. How do we build lives and cope with life without trauma defining us? That's what I really liked about it.
Yep. And so it's an empowering thing rather than looking at a deficit model. It's actually looking at a positive model. Yeah, fascinating. What about you, Donna?
I love science anyway, so it was good to learn all the science, and the training was a bit heavy just because of trying to fit that into my working week, and trying to add that on to that as well. So that was it was quite heavy for me. I liked the science bit, but also I like the tools and how to use the tools, because personally, when I started to use the tools for grounding, it really helped me with my stress levels. It really helped me with my anxiety. It really helped me to regulate my nervous system, and understand the process of how my nervous system affects other people's nervous system, and how their nervous system can impact me, especially in the groups when people are really struggling with they're deregulated, and how that how the mirror neurons work, and how to keep me in my own resilience zone. It's really helpful, and using that language in the house as well. My daughter says to me, "No, I think you're out of your resilience zone." you need to do something to get back into your resilience zone, which is great, because she's picking it all up as well. So it's benefiting me, my family, and the people that I work with as well.
Yep, and that whole idea of that resilient zone was really key to the training, wasn't it? The idea that there's this space that we operate in where we're the best version of ourselves, where we're actually able to cope with whatever life throws at us, and that sometimes we get bumped out of our zone, and it's actually quite normal to be bumped out of our zone, or to be at the top end or at the bottom end of our zone, because life happens to us. But in actual fact, what the community resiliency models teaches us in terms of the skills that are there is that we can do something about it to actually regulate ourselves again, that we've not somehow failed, we're not somehow there's not somehow a deficit in us if we can't do that, because actually it's a biological response. Our bodies are responding to stuff, and so very much the tools are centred round about our physiology rather than thinking our way out, because let's face it, nobody ever thought their way out of being scared, so to say to somebody, well, just stop being afraid, if that worked, then we would all be doing it all the time, wouldn't it?
That biology, rather than mental weakness, I thought was a whole new framework, and that really helped me. And also I've been practicing the tools a lot in my personal life, and I believe I've widened that resiliency zone with practice.
So feeling that you can actually cope with more being thrown at you and not trigger, and still stay the best version of yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really interesting. I was talking to somebody quite recently about using a bucket analogy. So it's like when your bucket's full of stuff, then even if somebody just tips an egg cup full in, it'll overflow. But actually, if you carry a bigger bucket, then your bucket's not nearly as full anymore, and it's got much more capacity. And I suppose that's what you're talking about. If you can increase the width of that zone, then you'll stay in it oftener rather than being bumped either high or low.
And of course, if you're bumped, being able to bring yourself back fairly easily. And actually with practice coming to a place where I can kind of recognise when I'm coming towards the top or the bottom of my resiliency zone, and be proactive about that using the skills and the tools. It's amazing.
I think it's really interesting. Donna, you touched on it already, that whole idea of being aware of what your nervous system's doing. So the fact that triggers or trauma in itself, or triggers, adverse effects, basically adverse incidents, actually kick in our sympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system actually wants to react in some way, shape or form, whether it's a fight reaction or a flight reaction or a freeze reaction or whatever. It wants to react in some way to deal with what it perceives as the threat. But in actual fact, what the community resiliency model teaches us is how to use different skills and tools to apply to get the parasympathetic nervous system to kick in, which is really the brake that stops the sympathetic nervous system running down the hill and out of control, basically. And that kind of, in a nutshell, I suppose, is the science behind it. So since the training then, how have you used it? What's that been like?
I think for me, as I said, it reduces my stress and my anxiety, or helps me to cope with it better, and being triggered in certain situations, particularly when you're in difficult groups like compassionate conversations, or some of the other groups that I do, and being triggered and being able to use the skills to not be so reactive, for my nervous system to regulate. So I've been using it in my work life, been using it in my personal life and my family's life, teaching my daughter as well. Not just me, teaching my daughter as well, because she can get herself in a bit of a muddle sometimes with our nervous system, or not being able to cope. And I think also, like, it's a different angle from counselling or doing counselling or talking about it, all your stuff. It's a softer, easier, gentler way, without having to go to that place, because not all people are ready to do counselling or have got the access to counselling. So I've been using it there as well, and also and the stuff that I do personally with recovery as well, teaching other girls and stuff like that to how to use it. And I'm also currently at the minute piloting a 6-week programme and the volunteer and the Made from Work group as well, and all my volunteers, and to teach them, you know, about their nervous system, and teach them the skills, and pilot that 6 weeks course.
And I suppose it's a bit of a mix, isn't it, of education, of psychoeducation, in terms of all the science that you were talking about, as well as the very practical skills that are there too. We've offered this to various organisations in terms of letting them know what's available in terms of training from us. I don't know if you want to speak a wee bit about that, Vikki, in terms of your experience of being out and chatting with other organisations.
Yeah, so I think what I really liked about this model was the fact that you actually don't need to understand the science to use it really, really effectively, and to feel the differences in your body, in physical sensations very, very quickly, and really, really effective. So for me, as we're taking it out to organisations, especially people that work in services, you know, staff teams that work in challenging environments, and I'm realising, you know, this is amazing for how you care for your staff team, but also what we've seen is actually these are really simple skills and tools that you can pass on to anybody, and they do not need to understand the cutting edge neuroscience stuff, which I don't understand that well, but I do know that that my long-term physical health would have been really, really affected by my stress levels. And that was one of the things I found really attractive about it. But in terms of other organisations working, I think it's really, really an amazing set of skills to be able to offer a staff team, and then the staff team can pass them on. And I think that would make Donna's talking about mirror neurons and stuff. And you know, in the simple terms, when did anyone ever calm down because you told them to calm down? That doesn't work, do you know? And fighting fire with petrol doesn't work. But definitely the community resiliency model skills and tools work. They really work, and they're really, really simple. So nobody has to be a scientist to understand this stuff. We're caring for our mental health, our resiliency, our ability to work in challenging environments, and also really simple skills to pass on to people as well, easily.
I think also, again, what I love about it is the fact that it is about empowering folks to be able to take control themselves. So you don't need somebody else to come and manage your anxiety. You can actually do that by yourself, and that's really empowering for people, isn't it? They don't need to feel that they need a professional to come alongside them. Now, I'm not knocking the place of clinical work or whatever. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have that. Absolutely they should. But in terms of being able to manage your own stress, your own anxiety, your own triggers, your own depression or whatever outside of that clinical setting, it's actually just a really useful set of skills and tools to have.
We've been using them at the beginning and at the end of groups. Sometimes just the two of us before we go in to do a challenging group. Sometimes afterwards with participants in groups. And just to bring us back to, so we call it resiliency zone in this model, but to bring us back online, to bring the thinking brain back online, to help us make rational and healthy decisions and get through the rest of our day. Really, really powerful stuff. Simple and effective.
So not only are we offering this as training to other organisations, but we're clearly also using the stuff within our own groups, piloting stuff here, collecting a pile of information, a pile of data that will actually help us to work out the effectiveness of it and how to be most effective with it. I think also, so I think for folks who are listening or who are watching this, we would want to be saying to them that there is training available, and so we're looking at training for other organisations. We are an organisation that works on a contribute what you can afford basis, so we do have a price for training, but actually if your organisation is a tiny organisation that doesn't have resources to be able to spend lots on training for your staff, then please do get in touch with us, because we would love to talk to you about it. By the time this podcast goes out, we will have a central training organised, and that central training, the details of that will be on the notes for this podcast. So if you have a look down below wherever you're watching this, or on some of our social media channels, you'll be able to find the details of the central training. And if you want to come to that, whether you're coming because you're part of an organisation, you want to use it with folks you work with, or actually if you're coming because you want to use it with yourself, then either is perfectly admissible. And we'd love to see you there. Again, if you've got questions about it, if you want to talk to us about it, get in touch via the website. You can do that at www.healingfortheheart.co.uk and use the contact form. Get in touch with us and one of us will come back to you. Also keep an eye out over the next 6 to 12 months. We're hoping to digitise this, and so hopefully it'll be available on our Learning Hub and our website as well. But that's a wee bit for the future. We've not quite managed to get there with that yet. Well, that'll be, you have a starring role in it, Donna. It's like anyway, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, then please do follow us, and please do tell other people about us, so that more people can come and can be connected. We appreciate you joining us, and please do keep a lookout for the next one where we'll join you again and we'll have a chat on people just like us.